Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive into the fierce, incredibly modern, emotional core of a true literary classic. When Charlotte Brontë dropped this story back in 1847, it completely rattled readers. And honestly, it's easy to see why. Because here we have this story of a poor, powerless, orphaned woman who openly demands love, but absolutely, point-blank refuses to be possessed. It's this wild, cinematic journey about a woman who is desperate for belonging, but flatly refuses to just disappear inside someone else's life to get it. I mean, think about it for a second. How do you love someone deeply without giving them ownership over you? That right there is the central, timeless question beating at the heart of this novel. It's what takes the whole thing way beyond the boundaries of just some simple Gothic romance and turns it into this profound moral and social drama. You see, Jane isn't some passive heroine just sitting around waiting to be rescued. She is fiercely protective of her own spirit. So keep this question in the back of your mind, because Jane's battle to figure this out is exactly why her story still hits so incredibly hard today. Chapter 1. The Wounds of Youth. Now, to really get Jane, we have to start at the very beginning. As a kid, she's orphaned, she's penniless, and she's forced to live with relatives who literally despise her. She's treated like this inferior little burden by the exact people who are supposed to be caring for her. But here's the thing. She possesses one thing that absolutely no one can take away: her own soul. Her power comes entirely from her inner conviction, completely detached from any kind of social status. Her early life is literally just about survival. First, over at Gateshead, she suffers the trauma of her cruel Aunt Reed, who locks her in the absolutely terrifying Red Room, punishing her totally unfairly and making her feel entirely unwanted. Then, she gets shipped off to Lowood School. This is a harsh charity institution run by the hypocritical Mr. Brocklehurst, a guy who basically represents cruelty disguised as morality. But these early experiences of deep suffering, they actually forged Jane's unyielding hunger for justice, love, and dignity. They basically establish the emotional wound for the entire story. And even as a kid, Jane shows this fierce early rebellion. Just listen to what she actually says to her cruel Aunt Reed. I mean, wow, right? She is definitely not a victim who's just going to sit back and accept abuse. She's a survivor who fiercely defends her own self-worth. Even as a small girl, Jane insists that she deserves to be treated with basic, fundamental human decency. It totally sets the stage for this unbending moral code she carries right into adulthood. Chapter 2. The Master of Thornfield. Fast forward a bit, and Jane accepts a position as a governess at the sprawling, super-isolated Thornfield Hall. And it's here that she crosses paths with its master, Edward Rochester. The guy is charismatic, brooding, deeply wounded, and holding on to a lot of secrets. And despite the massive gap in their social standing, I mean, he's the wealthy master, she's the hired help, this incredibly fascinating dynamic begins to unfold between them. Now, what's so cool about this relationship is that it isn't based on superficial romance at all. It's built through these long, intense conversations and a powerful intellectual match. Rochester actually recognizes Jane's mind and her spirit. In a Victorian society that told women of Jane's class they were practically invisible, Rochester truly sees her. But as you can imagine, this intense connection is fraught with tension across some seriously rigid lines of class and gender. So, when Jane believes she's being sent away, she drops these electric words on Rochester. It is just a stunning moment. Jane is insisting that despite her poverty, her lack of family, and her total lack of social rank, her moral and emotional worth make her his absolute equal. She's demanding to be recognized not as some subservient employee, but as a human being with a soul identical in value to his own. Chapter 3. The Gothic Secret. Just as they finally declare their love and prep for a wedding, we kind of have to acknowledge that Thornfield is a place of deep shadows. And Rochester, well, he comes with some massive red flags. There's this strange demonic laughter echoing in the halls, unexplained fires being set in the dead of night. There is this dark, looming danger lurking on the third floor that strongly suggests Rochester's world is built on a terrifying foundation. And then, boom, the devastating truth comes out right at the altar on their wedding day. Rochester is already married. He has a wife, Bertha Mason, who is suffering from severe mental illness and is literally kept locked away in the attic of Thornfield. Bertha kind of represents the dark secrets, the confinement, and the repressed truths of their society. So Rochester's deception creates the central moral crisis of the entire story. He practically begs Jane to stay with him anyway, to run off to France and just live as his mistress. Faced with Rochester's massive deception and his desperate pleading, Jane utters this fierce, iconic declaration. She's facing the ultimate test here. She loves this guy deeply. He's offering her comfort, passion, and a total escape from a life of lonely toil. But accepting his offer? That means abandoning her conscience. It means becoming entirely dependent on him and fundamentally compromising her moral identity. So, faced with this totally impossible choice, Jane flees Thornfield. She just leaves in the middle of the night with absolutely nothing. She ends up wandering the desolate moors and literally faces starvation. Seriously, this is the defining moment of the story. Jane proves that she would rather face physical death out in the cold than abandon her integrity. She absolutely refuses to trade her soul for safety or affection. Chapter 4. The Second Moral Test. Rescued from the absolute brink of death by the Rivers family, who, funny enough, turn out to be her cousins, Jane recovers and finds this quiet, peaceful life as a village schoolteacher. But wouldn't you know it, she's soon faced with another proposal. This time, it's from St. John Rivers. He's a highly disciplined, super ambitious clergyman who wants her to marry him and travel off to India as a missionary. Okay, so Jane is now caught between two impossible traps. On the one hand, you had Rochester, who offered intense, burning passion, but at the ultimate cost of her morality and self-respect. On the other hand, St. John is offering a life of noble, religious duty, but one that is completely devoid of love. St. John isn't an evil guy, but his vision of life would completely crush Jane's emotional existence. Ultimately, Jane rejects St. John's chilling counteroffer. She realizes that a marriage of pure duty without any passion is really just another way of erasing her inner self. Rochester offered passion that would destroy her conscience. St. John offers duty that would destroy her heart. So Jane chooses a third path, herself. She simply refuses to surrender her identity to either man's demands. Chapter 5. Return as an equal. While she's living with the Rivers family, Jane gets some wild news. She's inherited a vast fortune from her uncle in Madeira. Suddenly, the entire dynamic is flipped upside down. Jane is now wealthy, she's independent, she finally has a family. Having completely secured her own autonomy, she is finally free to listen to her heart and seek out the man she still loves. She returns to find Thornfield is just a blackened ruin. It was destroyed in a fire set by Bertha, who unfortunately perished in the flames. So Jane tracks Rochester down to this secluded manor called Ferndene. And Rochester is completely humbled. He lost his sight and one of his hands trying to save his household from the fire. The power dynamics have radically shifted here. The playing field is entirely leveled. He's no longer the wealthy, towering master, and she is no longer the poor, dependent servant. Which leads us to one of the most famous lines in literally all of literature. Reader, I married him. But listen, Jane's real victory here is not merely that she gets married. Her true victory is that she secures her independence first. When she finally chooses love, she does it as a completely free person. She comes to Rochester purely by her own choice, on totally equal footing, bringing her own resources and her uncompromised soul. When we really zoom out and look at the major themes here, we see Brontë masterfully weaving together a story about class, trauma, and a woman's unyielding demand for self-worth. It pushes hard against the super limited roles available to women back then. It insists that moral worth has absolutely nothing to do with social rank, and it explores how true faith is really a matter of personal spiritual independence, not just blind obedience to the rules. Jane survives, and her story resonates so powerfully with us even today, because she represents a heroine who flat out refuses to trade her soul. Her real battle isn't just against poverty or cruelty. It's against the deeply ingrained idea that love requires self-erasure. She insists time and time again that her inner life, her desires, and her conscience are absolutely vital. And so we're left with this really provocative final thought. It challenges us to consider how Jane Eyre's fierce, incredibly modern battle for self-preservation applies to our own lives right now. She wanted to be seen, chosen, and loved, but never at the cost of her freedom or dignity. It's an incredible balancing act, and exploring how Jane manages it is exactly what makes this explainer so fascinating. Keep this question with you next time you reflect on her story.